The Modern Warfare 3 beta is here, and it is fantastic. I seriously cannot wait for the full release of Modern Warfare 3 now. But since we're on the beta, we might as well have the best settings possible, so let's just dive straight in. We are going to cover the most important settings here, by the way, not just every single setting on the game, and we start with the button layout. This is more for people that have ordinary controllers, so if that's you, I recommend using Bumper Jumper Tactical. This just means you can do all of the different movement mechanics on Call of Duty, but without taking your fingers and thumbs off the controller. So for example, you can jump shot with the left bumper, and you can drop shots by clicking in the right analog. But of course, if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, you can edit commands and assign them to various buttons. Next up are the dead zone inputs. For this, I always recommend putting these settings as low as you can go for the minimum standards before you start getting stick drift, which is where your character starts moving on their own. If this happens, just put these settings up slightly, say by 1, then go back into the game. If you still have stick drift, put it up by 1 again, just until it stops. Now, thankfully, on Modern Warfare 3, we do have a test stick dead zone. So for example, I'm on minimum 4 here, so in theory, when I move my sticks around and then let go, they shouldn't be drifting off on their own. Next up, as we go across to aiming, we have the stick sensitivity. I personally run 7/7, which Call of Duty says is high, but I would recommend even higher if you can do it, as long as you can still hit your shots. A great technique that I do is to put my stick sensitivity up to just around where it becomes uncomfortable and difficult to hit shots. Then once you've done that, put your ADS sensitivity multiplier on 0.8. So you still get the speed when you're moving around and turning, but when you aim in, your sensitivity is slightly lower, helping you hit your shots. For aim response curve type, put this on dynamic. This is great for most players on fast-paced games, and Modern Warfare 3 is absolutely that. For aim assist, we of course want this enabled, and for the aim assist type, that's absolutely fine being left on default. For gameplay, I recommend automatic tactical sprint. This makes it so when you move forward with your character, you immediately go into a full tactical sprint. So you just move around the map a lot quicker and have better movement as a result. For all the various mantle settings, switch these all off. Generally, they kind of get in the way and slow you down a lot when you're trying to run around the map, and can inadvertently make you jump up things during a gunfight. For invert, slide, and dive behavior, I recommend going back to standard here. So previously, it was best to invert this, because diving is a much more important mechanic on Modern Warfare 2, but since we can once again utilize sliding a lot better on Modern Warfare 3, I recommend going back to standard on this setting. Then at the bottom of the gameplay settings, we have weapon mount exit delay. Just ensure to put this on short. Next up, we have the graphic settings, and of course for on-demand texture streaming, we want this on. Then we want world motion blur, weapon motion blur, and film grain all switched off and down to 0. I'll be honest, they do look great, but they can kind of make it hard to see sometimes. Then for depth of field, switch this off as well. This removes any blurriness when you aim in, so makes it easier to see enemy players. For Fidelity FX CAS, this is a kind of personal preference. I'm on the Xbox Series X, and I've got this switched on, and with the strength all the way up to 100. For me, this sharpens the image beautifully and removes any kind of natural blurring that occurs. But for some people, that's going to be a little bit too sharp. And in fact, on older generation consoles, you're going to get a little bit of screen tearing potentially. So I do recommend switching this on, but the strength is kind of up to you. For 120Hz refresh rate, if you do have the option, switch this on. This allows us to play at 120 frames per second, assuming your monitor or TV allows it. For field of view, I've got mine all the way up to 120, so that gives me the widest image possible. And for multiplayer, that's pretty perfect, but it does come at the cost of some frames per second. On newer generation consoles, that just ends up being a few frames lost. On PC, of course, it depends on which one you've got, but on older generation consoles, that frame loss can actually be significant, so you can turn it down a little bit. But whatever platform you're on, I do recommend running at least 100. For ADS field of view, put this on affected. This just means that when you aim in, we're still on the field of view setting that we've just set here. It doesn't default back to 80. And for weapon field of view, put this on wide. This makes the weapon look smaller, freeing up more space on the screen to potentially see more enemies. For camera movement, put this on least. For brightness, that's a personal choice, but for Modern Warfare 3, I've put mine on 55, which is actually much lower than what I play on Warzone. And for me, I think the game looks great like this. For safe area, minimize this as much as possible. This just brings your minimap a little bit closer to the center of the screen, meaning you can keep looking at it without potentially missing something happening in the game. But continuing with graphics, we want to go down to interface, and specifically, we want to go to color customization, and then down to the color filter settings. Putting on filter 2 here makes the game pop a hell of a lot more. So of course you can leave all the default settings on for graphics, and it's gonna look really realistic and like an actual Warzone. But with with these graphics settings, it looks a little bit friendlier, a little brighter, and much easier to see enemies. Now finally, we are going to go on to some audio settings, and for the mix, I do recommend headphone bass boost. And for the volumes, I recommend a 70 for your master volume, although largely this is going to be down to your headset or your TV if you play on there, since really you control the master volume that way. For the music volume, I've got on 0. For the dialogue volume, 70, since actually the players do shout out some useful information. Effects volume, 100, because this is things like footsteps. Voice chat volume, 50, and cinematic music volume on 16. You can put this down to 0 as well to remove all the distractions, but I don't mind a little bit of cinematic music as long as it doesn't drown out all the other stuff. Then we want to make sure that the mono audio is switched off here. This just ensures that we have directional audio, so we know if gunfire, for example, is coming from the left or right. So there was a quick tour of all the important settings on the Modern Warfare 3 beta. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am, and actually let me know down in the comments what you're thinking. It's good to know sometimes if I'm deluded or not. And now that we're finished up here, why don't you check out some of my latest videos on Warzone?